Now, we're getting ready for some high-stakes talks that are going to take place any moment now. U.S. President Joe Biden is preparing for a video call with the Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Top of the agenda will be Russia's troop buildup on its border with Ukraine. Russian forces have massed in several locations close to Ukraine and Belarus, including the annexed territory of Crimea. The United States has threatened severe economic consequences if Russia decides to invade its neighbor, including targeting its banks. While Moscow denies it plans to invade Ukraine, it says the troop buildup seen here, or we should have seen here in an aerial photograph, is a defensive tactic. Russia wants the West to guarantee that NATO won't seek to incorporate Ukraine.
Not the best of friends. U.S. President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin last met in June. Since then, tensions over Ukraine have grown worse. Both sides say the other is trying to destabilize the region. Russia fears that the West is trying to weaken Russian security by pushing Ukraine to join the NATO military alliance. Putin has said that would be a red line. For the West, Russia's buildup of troops along the border is an escalation.
We're aware of Russia's actions for a long time, and my expectation is we're going to have a long discussion with Putin. I don't accept anybody's red line.
Russia says it's the U.S. and NATO that are responsible for any tensions. The threat on our western border is really growing. See how close NATO military infrastructure has moved to Russia's borders. This is more than serious for us. Analysts say the situation is fragile. On the eve of the meeting, the Kremlin said U.S.-Russian relations were in a lamentable state. And there are many ways Moscow's troop buildup could go wrong, even if it is just a bargaining tactic.
No matter what Putin intends, the possibility of accident or incident leading to a hot crisis is very real. So I think it's a very concerning situation. I do think that he is setting up, in some ways, his conversation with Biden. But frankly, I think Biden, in many ways, has the upper hand here because Putin very much wants this meeting with Biden.
Russia wants a, quote, security guarantee from Biden, meaning that Ukraine will not join NATO and that U.S.-backed forces will not come up to the Russian border. But those are assurances Biden is unlikely to give.
All right, for more on the diplomatic standoff, I want to reach out to Ines Pohl in Washington and Yuri Roshetto in Moscow. They are our bureau chiefs in those respective capitals. Yuri, I want to give you the first word. What is President Putin's objective going into these talks?
Well, Leila, first of all, I can't imagine that the Kremlin really is interested in the armed conflict with Ukraine escalating. Surveys show that that would be very unpopular here with people. Tens of thousands of Russians have lots of relatives and friends in Ukraine. So it would be very difficult for the Russian president to explain to his voters why Russia is suddenly attacking Ukraine. Ultimately, it's more about the Russian president putting pressure on the West. Vladimir Putin said just a few days ago that Moscow should maintain what he called a certain state of tension between Russia and several countries for as long as possible. And what he wants in exchange for easing that tension is a written guarantee from NATO not to expand further towards Russia. And especially the idea of Ukraine eventually joining NATO is a clear red line for Moscow.
Ines in Washington, let's get the perspective from the U.S. What is President Biden expected to tell Mr. Putin?
His spokespeople said yesterday that this is kind of the last window for some diplomatic alternatives to military action in Ukraine, Leila. So he will try to find other ways, but he will definitely send out some clear warning if Putin sends out forces to invade Ukraine. The president's commitment to Ukraine is seen here as really unshakable. And this means that he will leave no doubt in this conversation, which is just about to happen, that he will cause tremendous economic pain to Russia if they really dare to invade Ukraine.
And Yuri, from President Putin's perspective, what would allay Mr. Putin's fears? I know you alluded to him wanting assurances that Ukraine won't become a NATO member, but NATO is not intending to have Ukraine as its member. So will that be enough?
Well, I think assurances that Ukraine won't become a NATO member would be the most important achievement. Military experts here assume that the Kremlin's biggest concern, Leila, right now is the growing strength of the Ukrainian Navy and its exercises in the Black Sea together with NATO. Kiev has agreed to jointly build warships and boats with Turkey, France and Great Britain. Also important is the agreed supply of British missiles to arm those warships. All of this, as well as Kiev's plans to build new naval bases, are making Moscow more and more uncomfortable, analysts say. Another aspect are potential new US sanctions against Russia that Putin is likely to fear, including disconnecting Russia from the financial messaging network SWIFT, which is likely to cause a collapse of the Russian market. So for Moscow, that could also be a serious blow as well.
Ines, if there is no pathway to de-escalation, could we see a return of U.S. forces in Europe?
Well, first of all, Leila and Yuri, it is the spokespeople, again, whom I could talk to yesterday, made it crystal clear that Biden will under no circumstances agree on any red line when it comes to NATO and Ukraine and other countries being able to join. So I think this is really not an option. Having that said, it is very unlikely that American forces would really come directly to Ukraine's aid, especially with this President Biden, who is so proud that he ended the so-called never-ending war in Afghanistan. But on the other side, Biden is under a lot of domestic pressure. He has to show that he really is back on the world stage as a world leader in the driving seat. And therefore, this meeting today is more than about the conflict in Ukraine and Russia. It is also the question how strong Biden stands also when it possibly comes to conflict with China. So this is something with what many Americans will have in their minds when they're watching this meeting and the outcome.
Yuri, I want to give you the last word. We just have 20 seconds left. Have sanctions in the past changed the Kremlin's actions?
Not that much, but the new potential sanctions from US towards Russia could be personal sanctions against the close circle of Vladimir Putin, and that sanctions could attack and could be very, very successful from the US-American point of view.
All right, Yuri Roshetto in Moscow and Ines Pohl in Washington. Thank you both for your coverage. Appreciate it.